What if I told you that long before grocery stores, before refrigerators, before the very idea of running out of food, entire nations of people survived winters so brutal that rivers froze solid for months? Not with stocked pantries, not with delivery apps, not even with metal pots, but with something far more powerful: knowledge, passed down quietly by firelight, generation after generation. Here is where things get personal. These weren't just survival techniques, they were love languages. A grandmother's hands pressing fat into dried meat. A father teaching his son which roots to dig from frozen ground. A mother hanging strips of squash in the autumn air, knowing exactly how many mouths she needed to feed come January. And most of it is gone. Today, we are counting down 25 forgotten Native American winter meals. Ingenious, resourceful, and deeply human. Stay until the end, because one simple survival principle hidden inside these meals might completely change how you think about food forever. We begin at number 25, pemmican, a dense, almost impossibly calorie-rich mixture of dried bison meat, rendered fat, and wild berries, carried across frozen plains by people who could not afford a single wasted bite. The real genius was in the ratio: fat and protein combined in proportions that modern nutritionists are only now beginning to understand. It could last for months, sometimes years, packed by hand, carried inside animal skin pouches, eaten in small pieces during blizzards when hunting was impossible. We lost something when the bison herds collapsed. We didn't just lose an animal, we lost an entire food system. Number 24, wasna, the Lakota variation of pemmican, made with choke cherries crushed into the fat and meat mixture. And get this, those berries weren't just for flavor. They provided vitamin C during months when fresh fruit was nothing but a memory. Sweet and savory and rare. Your great-grandmother knew this without a nutrition label to tell her. Number 23, Three Sisters, winter stew. Corn, beans, and squash, slow simmered together in one pot while snow fell outside. Translation: this wasn't just comfort food. These three crops, grown together in the same soil, created a nutritionally complete meal on their own. Carbohydrates, protein, and vitamins working in harmony. A pot bubbling all day, filling a lodge with warmth and the smell of something deeply, quietly nourishing. Number 22, acorn mush. Ground acorns, leached of their bitterness through hours of washing in cold running streams, then cooked into a thick, warm porridge. But here is where it gets truly poignant. The patience required to make this meal was itself a kind of teaching, grandmothers showing granddaughters that some nourishment cannot be rushed, that cold hands and slow work were part of the recipe. Number 21, cattail root mash. The starchy roots of cattail plants, dug from frozen wetland edges and mashed into a pale, dense paste. A humble emergency food, yes, but life-saving in ways that defy its simplicity. We lost something when we stopped knowing which plants growing near our homes could feed us. Number 20, dried fish and berries. In the northern tribes, smokehouses worked quietly through autumn, filling with the rich, woody smell of preservation. Fish and berries transformed by smoke and air into food that could carry a family through the coldest months. The real genius was in the combination: protein and sugar, salt and sweetness, sustaining life in a way that felt almost generous. Number 19, wild rice and game. Harvested by canoe in the golden weeks of autumn, wild rice stored beautifully through winter, slow cooked with venison or duck into meals that were both filling and deeply flavorful. Your grandfather knew this grain long before it appeared on restaurant menus as a premium ingredient. Here is where things get personal. These weren't just meals, they were systems. Entire survival philosophies built on one truth that our modern world has almost completely forgotten. Nothing could be wasted. Not fat, not bones, not bitter acorns, not the woody stems of cattails. Every part of every plant and every animal held value, and the knowledge of how to unlock that value was considered one of the most precious things a person could possess. Today, we throw away food because it is inconvenient, because the sell-by date says so, because we simply forgot it was in the back of the refrigerator. Back then, forgetting was not an option. So here is a question for you, and I genuinely want to know what you think, so leave it in the comments below. If grocery stores disappeared tomorrow, How many days could you feed your family from what you already know? Hit like if these forgotten memories matter to you, and subscribe so we can keep uncovering them together. Number 18. Maple sugar cakes. Sap boiled down, slowly into solid amber cakes, sweet and portable and full of quick energy. And get this, maple harvesting happened at the very end of winter, when food stores were at their lowest and people were most exhausted. Translation: maple sugar wasn't just a sweetener, it was hope, the first sign that the land was waking up again. Number 17. Bone broth and jerky. Nothing, not a single part of a hunted animal, went to waste. Bones simmered for hours into rich, deeply savory broth. Meat sliced thin and dried slowly over low heat. A steaming bowl of bone broth on a freezing night was not a wellness trend. It was survival, wrapped in warmth. Number 16. Cornmeal dumplings. Simple balls of corn dough, dropped into simmering soups and stews to stretch a meal further. Soft and filling, they turned a thin broth into something that could quiet the hunger of an entire family. We lost something when we stopped understanding how to make a little feed many. Number 15. Ash roasted root vegetables. No pot required. No metal tools. Just roots buried directly in the glowing embers of a fire, pulled out steaming and tender when ready. There is something ancient and deeply satisfying about that image. Digging warm food from the earth, cooked by fire, eaten with bare hands in the cold. Number 14. Berry fat cakes. Rendered fat mixed with dried berries and pressed into small, dense portions, given to children before long winter journeys. The real genius was in their portability, compact, calorie-rich, and sweet enough to feel like a treat even in the hardest months. Number 13. Stone-boiled meat. Water heated not by flame beneath a pot, but by dropping fire-heated stones directly into the liquid. The hiss of hot stone meeting cold water, the sudden rise of steam, cooking through ingenuity when the tools we take for granted simply didn't exist. Number 12 through number 6 move quickly, and each one deserves to be remembered. Smoked venison stew, its rich aroma clinging to winter lodge walls for days. Blue corn porridge, its deep, almost violet color startling and beautiful in a season of gray. Sun-dried squash strips hung in long golden ribbons through the autumn before the cold arrived. Duck-fat corn cakes, their edges crisping in rendered fat, rich and warming in a way that nothing else could replicate. Roasted chestnuts and nuts, cracked open by firelight, ground into flour or eaten whole, dense with calories saved carefully for the coldest weeks. Hominy soup, corn treated with wood ash through a process called nixtamalization. Translation: a technique that unlocked nutrients in corn that would otherwise pass through the body unused. A discovery so sophisticated, it took modern science centuries to fully explain. And snow-cooked broths, using melted snow itself as the base, turning winter into sustenance rather than obstacle. The final 5 come quickly. Bare fat fry cakes, hot and crispy, and comforting in a cold so deep it ached. Sunflower seed mash, rich with protein, and fat ground from seeds gathered in summer. Ground pine bark flour, an emergency famine food made from the inner bark of trees, humble, bitter, and life-saving. Frozen fish slices, preserved in winter's own cold and eaten as the season demanded. And finally, number 1, the mixed survival stew. Whatever remained, whatever had been saved, dried, smoked, or stored, combined into one last pot, simmered down into something warm and sustaining. Not a recipe, a determination to survive, but here's where it gets truly poignant. These 25 meals were never just recipes. They were knowledge, memory, relationship. They speak of people who understood something we have quietly, carelessly forgotten. That food is not something you simply purchase. It is something you know, something you tend, something you pass down with your hands and your patience and your presence. We lost something when these traditions were broken. Not just ingredients and techniques. We lost an entire way of seeing the world. One where nothing was wasted, where every plant and animal was understood, where feeding your family through a brutal winter was considered one of the highest forms of human intelligence. And yet, the knowledge is not entirely gone. It lives in indigenous food sovereignty movements, in foragers and seed savers, in the grandmothers who still make hominy the old way, and the young chefs who are bringing pemmican and acorn mush back to restaurant tables with quiet, fierce pride. Maybe that knowledge is not lost. Maybe it is just waiting to be remembered, waiting for someone, maybe you, to start listening again. The next time you open your refrigerator without thinking, ask yourself, what did they know that I have forgotten? And what would it mean to remember it? If this journey into the past meant something to you, subscribe to Lost American Memories, because there are still countless forgotten stories waiting to be brought back to the light.